All right, I am now at the second lecture of Haldeman, which is called Logic of Armor. And here are the three things I'm going to talk about: sex and social. Well, I'll put them up. You can see them. The When this novel was first written, it, as I mentioned or indicated in the first lecture, it turned a number of heads because of the treatment of women. And it was banned because of the sex and the language, which at the time was enough to get a thing banned. That's the kind of thing that actually could cause a movie to get an R rating, and to keep people out of the theater. I mean, Taxi Driver, for instance, was restricted in or 76 when it came out. Yeah, I think it was 76, and there really isn't. The ideas are upsetting. I mean, Iris as a teenage prostitute, and Sport is played by Harvey Keitel, is the 20-something pimp, and of course Travis Bickle, played by the very young and astonishingly, actor Robert De Niro, kills a lot of people at the end of the movie, in a very operatic sort of way, but so there's a lot of implied violence, and there is the famous scene of Scorsese himself sitting in the back of the taxi cab and talking about shooting his wife. I can't remember what the. Okay, so mostly it was language that got the film banned, but there isn't any explicit sex. I don't remember there being any nudity. It was language and ideas. So it's the same kind of thing happened to this novel, and the idea of a co-ed army that would sleep together was also very shocking to the purists, who were straight up masculinist, people who had lived through World War II, basically, and were now the generals running Vietnam. And they continued to look at women as sort of receptacles for male waste products and lust, basically. In Forever War, women, however, become inscribed in the machine just as much as any man, and this is really one of the enormous steps, and one of the important steps of this book, which is that it removes the concept that women are, because of essentialism, biologically different from men, which is true. They are biologically different from men, but does that make them predisposed to nurture where men are predisposed to nature? And as if women can't be stupid and be killed and be racists and anti-Semites, or as thoughtful as the next person can be. That gender assignation doesn't actually have anything to do with the programming that's really in your head. That's the idea. And again, in this edition I'm using on page 30, the camp commander at the beginning says, "I'm glad you're taking good care of yourselves, because each of you represents an investment of over $1 million and 1/4 of a human life." And so this is on page 30. So the burden is that basically you are worth, your soldiers are, you are all, to paraphrase Lee Ermey as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket, here you are all equally worthless. So this should ring a bell from Aliens, where the focus is on the substantial dollar value of the equipment, and let's not get fussy about the human beings. Although the body is garbage, it's increasingly well-trained garbage, is sort of also the problem. And this is one of the thinkings about these, say, an Air Force pilot or naval Air Force pilot, or whatever, is that what is the actual worth of an Air Force pilot? Some number of millions of dollars of training is what they're worth, because it's the pilot represents an investment of time training, space in trainers, space in that is in physical training, in training machines, and in flying aircraft and so on, all of which goes up in smoke, so to speak, if the pilot is killed because of his or her stupidity or incompetence. And this is the the language of the state, or in this case, potentially the body without organs, depending on your mileage. So the sex that the soldiers have looks like fun until we read the fine print, which we get on page 45, where and they then unleash Stargate's 18 sex-starved men on our women, compliant and promiscuous by military custom and law. And this is the part that's in brackets, right, or parentheses. So the point is that one of the things that Holloman doesn't talk about in the military is rape. And rape occurs outside when they go home in the second of the three acts, essentially, of the novel. And there are these dramatic, either near rapes or attacks or, disasters. But inside the military, they're all kinds, they're pals, until, of course, we get to the third section, where it turns out they're not pals at all. They're all killers, and as far as they're concerned, the commander is, as they call him, the old queer, because he's straight, and they don't get him at all, and they're all prepared to kill him because he wouldn't survive, which he has no idea about until they finally educate him. So this concept of being promiscuous by custom is strong enough, but promiscuous by law suggests that there is no such thing anymore as rape. In other words, rape is going to happen, but it's all going to be just part of business as usual, which is terrifying. A terrifying idea. And such laws, quote unquote, cross religious and social barriers without consideration, because there are no religions left. I mean, the religion is kilocalories. So the customs that were customs and rituals of society are replaced by the corporate self. In this case, it means the sort of the forcing of people to become homosexual, no matter their gender orientation, because the state demands it. The end. Not because it may be what you actually want to do or you're interested in, but just because the state demands it. So the issue is not that you've got a queer army or not. That's not the point. The point is that you've got an army which has been formed completely, born, raised, and drafted, remember, as the medic says, so the gender assignation is like, the military wants this, so that's it, right? It was, how to say it, his hands fluttered. It was a crime, Elsevier said laconically. That was when the Eugenics Council was first getting people used to the idea of universal homosex. Eugenics Council, part of the UNEF on 197. So the new sheriff in town is essentially this Eugenics Council, which runs the human race now, and does things for the good of the race, and there is no individual anymore. This is a sort of standard utopian or dystopian nightmare, that the individual is made to disappear. And you can see why, at the moment, we're going as we lurch towards what appears to be the end of the election. I'm at the point, let's see, for me, in my time, because I don't know when you're seeing this, but in my time, it's January 2nd. So we should be 4 days away from the Senate confirming Biden's election, essentially, his status as president-elect. Whether that actually happens, is part of this struggle between people who would say there are things we have to do for other people, and that isn't, we're not following authoritarian laws. We're doing things for other people. We're wearing masks. We're staying in to try to flatten that yet another curve and prevent other people from dying who are the most at risk. And then you've got people who are, I won't wear a mask, I won't do this, I won't do that, I'm going to get together with my family, and so on, and are going to spread the disease around, and will say, this is my right. So we have these sort of insanely extreme individualists who will say, it's nobody can tell me what to do at all, and other people are saying, no, I accept that there's the state has a role to play, we all have a role to play in each other's health, and so on. This issue is one which is always fraught in American studies. When you deal with American texts, there's always a struggle between what's good for the group and what's good for the individual. And the individual will almost always come out as the hero, and the group will rarely come out as the hero. And I include things like, like animated films, same kind of, it doesn't matter, like whether especially if it's a film for children, where there's an individual, they will come out as effectively, they're an individual, they're allowed to be an individual as long as they are good for the group, but the group has to submit to the individual. And it can be something as like Toy Story, where Woody is primary, he's the hero, and the group has got to knuckle under. Anyway, Mandela points out this issue basically on page 60. It's almost impossible to get sexually excited inside a suit, which is this sort of combination of battle armor that Heinlein talks about in Starship Troopers, and a spacesuit, with the relief tube and the silver chloride sensors poking you, but somehow this was my body's response to emotional impotence. And so sex finally is really about invasion of the self by power, which is much greater than one ever can be. You can never be more than this power, which means you really are vulnerable, and you really cannot armor this inner self. Not this way. This is, the way to some extent, the way to protect the inner self is to release, here we get into this sort of difficult territory, but to release the demands of the ego. But anyway, it's another whole discussion.